In this video, I'd like to address two questions about the online version of managerial economics. First, I just want to talk about what this course is about, which is relevant both to the online version and just the course itself. Secondly, I'll talk specifically about how the online version works. This is an MBA level course in managerial economics. The course goal really is to provide you with an understanding of aspects of microeconomics that are relevant to managerial practice. The way I think about that is really through this set of pictures. You know, we perceive information through the newspaper or other sources of information that we encounter, and the goal of the course is to give you a lens, a way of thinking about these data that we see that will make you more effective. At some vulgar level, we could just talk about making more money, but more generally, it's about being more efficient and being better able to accomplish whatever objectives we have. The course also teaches, or I guess has illustrations of way to accomplish the loftier ones, some specific tools related to pricing, the competitive environment, and more. Here's just a picture of a formula that maybe look mysterious now, but in a few weeks will be less mysterious and more useful. The course really has four broad topics. First is what I'd call the fundamentals, really supply and demand. So in the first 2 weeks of the course, we'll build our way to supply and demand. First by talking about consumer theory, demand, and the elasticity of demand. Then we'll talk about costs, scale, and market structure. Then we'll move and put supply and demand together to do supply and demand analysis of perfect competition. And this will also allow us to use supply and demand to analyze various kinds of interferences or interventions in markets like taxes and quotas on imports. From there, we'll move to the second major component of the course, a topic I would call pricing with market power. So the issue here is when you are one firm operating alone in a market, you face the market demand curve as your own demand curve. You now have some control over your pricing, and it allows for much more interesting strategies than a perfectly competitive market. Now, in addition to talking about just simply pricing with market power, we'll talk about really an array of sophisticated pricing strategies, including price discrimination, two-part tariffs, bundling, and a few others. So this is a fun part of the course that's about essentially ways to make more money. The third major topic in the course is oligopoly and strategic interaction. Here what we're thinking about is what happens in markets with a few major players, a few large firms. We'll make our way through some intermediate market structures called monopolistic competition and the model of dominant firms to talk directly about oligopolistic interaction via game theoretic models. So we'll talk about homogeneous goods markets as well as differentiated products markets. In that part of the course, we'll do a brief introduction to non-cooperative game theory. Then finally, we make it to a potpourri of other topics. One is risk, uncertainty, and insurance, which we'll spend a bit of time on. And then finally, we'll talk about externalities and their internalization in markets and other market failures, including public goods and asymmetric information. This is a theory course, but we try to tie everything. In fact, we do tie everything to real-world examples. So this is not a theory course for its own sake, but rather a set of theories that I think, and we think, are very useful for understanding real-world problems. And in every part of the course, we'll illustrate it and tie it down with real-world examples. All right, let's talk a little bit about the online version of the course. First of all, the online version has the same content as the face-to-face version of the course. I have the same learning expectations of students, and you should have the same learning expectations of yourselves. We do use different tools, though. Instead of meeting face-to-face for 3 hours and 20 minutes a week, we have online lectures. That's slides with audio. They're in chunks. Instead of 3 hours and 20 minutes at a time, they're in chunks of 10 to 20, sometimes 25 minutes apiece. And they're each followed by an online quiz, which I think is a nice tool for making sure you just understood what you just saw and learned. In addition, the course has a weekly individual problem set, and there are some other weekly activities. We have group problem sets in weeks 2 and 4. These are interesting problems where discussion is useful. And so you'll meet together using Google Hangout to work out those problem sets. In the other weeks, we'll have group discussions that are online. Now, those are asynchronous, so you and your group can kind of post answers and replies to each other. The reason I've gone this route is because many people in the online course don't have very flexible schedules. So we don't want to have a lot of things where you have to be someplace at a particular time. That's why we have just 2 of these group problem sets where you'll literally need to find a time to meet together online in weeks 2 and 4. But the other weekly activities don't require a time for you to literally be together at the same time. Finally, there's a class forum at Moodle, questions about managerial economics, where you can post questions that might be of general interest to others about the course or about specific questions about the course. And both I will monitor that, the TA, as well as you guys can monitor that and respond to each other as well. Now, we're going to have an online diagnostic midterm halfway through the course. The idea there is so you can make sure that you're on track and doing well, and if some adjustments necessary, you know soon enough that it's not too late. And then finally, we have an in-person final exam. So that's the only time you have to be on campus, and I'll notify you about the timing of that. Now, what are the benefits of online? Well, one I think you probably already know is flexibility. You don't need to be here for 3 hours and 20 minutes each week at night. It's tough for everyone, I know. But I should say that online's not a time saver. If you don't have enough time to take the face-to-face version, including time spent in class plus the time spent doing homework and so forth, then you don't have time for the online version either. So it's not about sort of total amount of time, but it is very much about the flexibility and when you spend the time, because you have control over how and when you consume the lecture. You take it in small chunks. If something's unclear to you, you can rewind in ways that are easier than in class. I mean, in class, in principle, you can raise your hand and say, can you explain that again? And some people do, but I've noticed that most people don't. So I suspect that there's this benefit of online that people can slow it down, do it again, or speed it up as people wish. But I want to be clear, even though there's flexibility, there still are weekly requirements. There's a set of requirements. There's there's the individual problem sets and the group discussions and the quizzes, and they all have deadlines you'll be notified about. So you need to stay on track. But within the week, you have quite a bit of flexibility about when to ingest the material. Now, what about interaction in the online version? Well, at one level, you're interacting with the material, that's for sure, and it's actually more than just an empty statement, because the quizzes after each mini lecture allow you to see, hey, did I get it? In a way that I think in the regular version of the course or without an online quiz, it's not possible to know quite so quickly. In the traditional versions of the course, there'd be a weekly problem set, you get it back a week later, and only then, maybe 2 weeks after you did it, do you know, oh, gee, I didn't understand that so well. Here, the feedback is pretty instantaneous, and I think that's a real aid to fixing problems before they arise. Secondly, there are group activities, as I've mentioned. 2 meetings with your group for those 2 group problem sets and 4 asynchronous weekly discussions. Those are pretty meaningful interactions. And I say that because, we have discussions in face-to-face classes, and those can be quite successful, but it's fairly uncommon for a discussion, or so I should say for a class involving 60 students, for there to be deep discussion that involves a high fraction of the class. What's nice about these discussions that take place online and in small groups is that everyone has a chance and even a responsibility to engage with the material and to communicate with each other about it, which I think is a very enriching experience. So I think of these as features and not bugs associated with online. Of course, there's a discussion board for questions. Hey, I'm confused about question number 2 on problem set whatever. Can you give me some hints? Oftentimes, you're not the only one with that question, so you post it to the discussion board, and maybe you answer each other, or maybe I answer you, or both. And that's a useful form of interaction as well. Now, I also have the possibility of office hours using Google Hangout. I'm quite happy to meet with people. I find people rarely take me up on this, but I still am earnestly hoping that you will. I can, in principle, meet with up to a dozen or so. At most, I've only had 1 person at a time meeting with me in office hours. But again, I stand ready, and I'm happy to do so. And finally, I'll put up an online review session before the final exam. Now, the question you might be asking yourself, should I take the online version? And let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, there are a few technical requirements. They're not very, stringent technical requirements these days. You need a broadband connection, and you need a Gmail account. And if you're a U of M student, you have one. So you need that in order to use Google Hangout, which you'll want to use to interact with your fellow group members for those two problem sets, or to meet with me if you want to do video office hours. Therefore, a webcam is useful. It's not absolutely necessary because you can interact using these tools without your face being visible. But it is kind of a useful humanizing technology. Now, another question, though, is sort of what kind of student are you? A little bit of tech savvy probably helps. I think maybe more important, I think the tech issues are sort of trivial in this day and age, but it's more like the question, are you able to learn a little bit on your own? I mean, in some real sense, you're not on your own, but I think it might feel a bit more isolated because you're, in front of your computer instead of in a room with 50 other people or something. But if you are somewhat reflective and if you are able to absorb materials and don't feel intimidated by that, then I think it'd be fine. I think it's particularly true. This course is a little bit mathy. It doesn't use a lot of deep math, but it does use math. If math is super rusty for you, then you might want to address that. I find that the people who are rustier in math seem to find the online format less congenial, although I'm not quite sure why that is, but it just seems to be true. Anyways, you should email me if you have questions. There's my email address, and it's available at the website and a variety of other places, jwaldfog@umn.edu. If you have questions about the course or whether you should take it in this format, happy to interact about those things. Now, finally, what's it like to spend a semester with me online? Well, that's kind of hard to say, but there are some videos online available for you to take a look at with me talking about economics, not in classroom settings, but in other settings, talking about, I think, fun questions about economics. There's a debate on capitalism at the Walker Art Center. There's a discussion on the economics of gift giving I gave at the Royal Society for the Arts in London a few years ago. And a debate I did on campus here at the university with rock star David Lowery on the effect of new technologies on the music industry. These links are available here, or you could just go to YouTube and Google my name and probably find these things. So I look forward to seeing you in the course.